Hello and welcome to the Law Eagle Minute. I'm Eric Townsend and I'm the owner and principal attorney at the Law Eagles. We represent policyholders whose insurance carriers have either denied their claim or underpaid their claim. We also represent people that have been injured in accidents. If you're searching for an attorney and you're not sure who to get in touch with, feel free to contact me. My information is going to be available at the end, and I'll do the best I can to get you in touch with the right attorney. I'd like to welcome today Rachael Callahan. She is the owner of the law firm and principal attorney at San Diego Evictions. As a landlord and tenant attorney, Rachael knows the landlord-tenant laws, including the new laws that have been enacted as a result of COVID-19 and the pandemic. Not only is she going to explain those here, but she has also parsed those on her website, which we'll be looking at too as she explains those. Her contact information will also be available at the end of the meeting, so you can get in touch with her directly if you need any other information. So Rachael, landlords and tenants right now are fearful and confused about what's going on. So thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it. I know the audience appreciates it. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. I actually put real clothing on today, so that's a good start for me.
That's good. I'm wearing slippers, so I put on mostly an official outfit. I saw on your website that you're a third generation San Diegan, so you're kind of royalty here in San Diego.
A rarity as well.
Very rare, for sure. So you went to UC San Diego, UCSD. You also went to the University of San Diego School of Law, which is also my alma mater. Apparently we graduated in the same year, so that's pretty cool. We never ran into one another, but I'm glad we got to meet via Zoom. And I think we've met a couple times randomly in the past. But before we jump into this, I want you to explain to the audience, explain to them what you do, what your business is.
Right. So I represent landlords, owners, and investment companies with regard to eviction and real property matters related to evictions. I've been doing eviction law since 2011, since I started practicing, and I've had my company, San Diego Evictions, since 2015. So basically, we kick people out of their homes.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, it's part of the economy, right? Someone's got to do it. Got to keep the economy flowing. That's how it's done. So I'm going to jump in. I want to get the audience looking at your website. And this is the moratorium, and it kind of goes over the information in regards to the different laws that have been enacted as a result of this pandemic. Can you parse out and kind of explain how the website works, how you parsed it out? That way, if a viewer goes on to look at it, they know how to find the information.
Absolutely. And I'll start by saying that this is a living, breathing document. This information is accurate as of the last time I verified would have been Friday. The laws are ever changing. The state of California is implementing new moratoriums, new restrictions, and then certain counties are in the process as well. But the way that this is organized, to start out, in the very beginning part, you'll see what the state of California has done. So this is applied statewide, and Governor Newsom issued the statewide moratorium after giving all of the counties and cities an opportunity to enact their own and feeling that they didn't properly do so. The California statewide mandate would apply to all of California, obviously, and anywhere that it does not conflict with a local ordinance. The local ordinances are designed to supplement what California has done. So I started with California statewide because that's going to be a baseline. And then the next section is the section of cities and localities that have not issued specific moratoriums. The reason that this comes next is because if you're in a city or locality that has not issued a moratorium, then statewide is all that you have to apply. The statewide mandate only references residential, so any of the ones in this group of localities that have not done their own is going to be just for residential tenants. The way that it's organized is you can see to the left, there's city and zip code. That way you can actually search by city or zip code, do a command or control F and type in either Carlsbad or 92013, that sort of situation. The next column is the reference. So that's basically where I got the information. And as I mentioned, this is a changing situation. A lot of them will just link you to the city web pages where it says, we don't have anything, or I've searched it and I can't find anything.
Okay.
And then the very far right is going to be the summary. And this is going to be throughout the document, starting with the top. The California moratorium has the summary. Then these localities that don't have anything issued have the summary. The next section then is going to be the cities that have implemented something. And again, it's organized the exact same way. So you can do a control or command F by zip code or city. And then the next is going to be the reference to it. It's going to be either the city actual ordinance or the city page that references a moratorium. And then again, the summary will be to the very right there. One of the reasons I'm including the links is because, again, that's the information that I based my interpretation on. And that is the part that'll very likely change. For example, you'll look at, I think Imperial Beach is an example where Imperial Beach says they have a moratorium, but through my best efforts, I was unable to actually find an order by Imperial Beach. And so what I did there is I summarized what I could find on the Imperial Beach website. And that's what you would expect the moratorium to be. And that's basically it. And then after this section of the local ordinances that have, or localities that have it, is going to be City of San Diego. City of San Diego was pretty quick to issue a detailed moratorium. And the County of San Diego, the unincorporated area of San Diego has actually they've been in communication trying to get a consistent application so that anything that's not listed above where it has a locality would either fall under City of San Diego or unincorporated. And so for now, the City of San Diego has an order, and that's the very big long summary there. And for now, the unincorporated areas of San Diego should apply the city. And again, you're going to search here, since City of San Diego has a bunch of zip codes. You can do the command F to find it in the row of zip codes. And then same with the unincorporated area. Again, there's not an official order for the unincorporated, but they will be mirroring the City of San Diego, and you can search the zip codes and localities there as well.
That's great. That's an excellent website. Thank you for putting all that information together in one place. That must have taken a ton of work to put that together.
Well, and as you mentioned, landlords and tenants are wondering what to do. Well, as a landlord tenant attorney, I have also been wondering what's going to happen. And so the reason I put it together was so that I could give my clients a best estimate of what I think is going to happen, and people have a resource to search it. And again, keeping in mind that this is just my summary of it. You may speak to other attorneys that may have a different opinion. For example, the Legal Aid Society has a slightly different interpretation, but this is at least a start to open the door to what you need to do with your tenants and how you need to work through this.
Gotcha. So it looks like the California state, their statewide mandate has some rules in it. Can you explain quickly what those rules are?
Sure.
Kind of the Cliff Notes version?
Absolutely. So if you look over on the left-hand side, you see an N-3720. That's the most recent order from Governor Newsom. In short, the tenant is supposed to notify the landlord in writing of an inability to pay or a COVID-19 related hardship, which could include medical bills, loss of work, that sort of thing. And then that needs to be supplied within 7 days of when rent is due. And then after your tenant or you supply your landlord with that information, you're supposed to get or supply support for that, which would be showing a pay stub with lack of information, or lack of pay rather, showing an EDD application, showing a letter from your employer terminating you or furloughing you, that sort of situation. The problem is California hasn't really worded it very clearly, and that would be just because of the haste in doing so. And so it's not clear when the documentation's due, but it's very important that people send it in and landlords try to get it, because you're not protected until you've both notified the landlord of the COVID-related hardship and produced documents to support it. So that's the crux of the state one.
Perfect. And so the rent, is it canceled? Is it deferred? What happens to the rent during this time?
Right. So it's not actually canceled. It'll be a deferment, and the deferment could be up until the end of the moratorium. Currently, the moratorium should be expiring May 31st, but very likely will be extended. And then the payback will be due within 6 months of March 25th, or whenever the moratorium's lifted, whichever occurs first, or if the tenant moves out. And that's going to be a bit tricky, because if all of a sudden the moratorium's lifted, then all of the rent is immediately due. So I think that'll be adjusted. So for now, it's going to be within 6 months of March 25th, or when the moratorium lifts, or if the tenant vacates, that
Gotcha.
all the deferred rent is due.
And for the state only applies to, there's residential and commercial tenants. What does the state law apply to?
The state law only references residential, and it'll be interesting, in my opinion, that will have to be changed, because of course commercial tenants are impacted by the economy and the COVID-19 as well, which is important to know when looking at the rest of the charts, because any locality that has not issued their own would only apply to residential, because the state only references residential moratorium for now.
Gotcha. Okay. I've had a couple people, and I did another segment that I did earlier that had to do with force majeure clauses. I've seen some case law on it and some other things in regards to, any kind of tenant, any kind of contract. Actually, it has to do with Civil Code Section 1511 and impracticability. Have you heard about that in regards to commercial tenants?
Absolutely. And I think we'll see a lot of people get creative. So
Okay.
what you're referring to there is the inability to use your space that you're renting, and the inability for the landlord to provide you a usable space. That's at no fault of either the tenant or the landlord. So I think we will see some interesting litigation on that, which is why I really believe the state of California will modify this to protect commercial tenants, because otherwise it's just going to be handled in the courts, and that's not going to be very efficient for anybody.
Kind of Wild West landlord-tenant law.
That's right.
Not good. Okay, so that's great. So those are the California laws. I'm not going to go through the ones that are applying the state regulation, because that's pretty simple. National City's doing that, Carlsbad, El Cajon, Encinitas. They're all listed at the top, so you can go through those and look at them. Cities with local ordinances, I think you went into a couple of these. You said how they're applying different ways. I noticed a couple of them you indicated that a couple of them were confusing. There were some that had rules, but they didn't actually execute any rules. There are other ones that were just confusing, like La Mesa.
Yes.
So, it sounds like it sounds like the pieces are going to get sorted out somewhere down the line. Is that right? Is that accurate?
It's going to have to. So either the state is going to have to issue something that supersedes all localities, or the localities are going to have to step up. And I think part of the reason that a lot of the ordinances are very confusing is because everybody's in a rush to do this. And so it'll have to be sorted out somehow, some way. Again, hopefully it's not just deferred to us sorting it out in the court, because that'll be one judge, one department, all of the county of San Diego having to apply confusing rules just like this chart and seeing that there would be, there would be 30 different things that apply at least. And again, there'll be some adjustments as we see how long the moratoriums go. Likely the moratoriums will be extended, but for now, nothing's going to happen until the court reopens, which is currently April 30th, but will likely also be extended.
Gotcha. I'm going to show the audience what you were talking about, doing a search, because this is actually kind of cool. So you can just go to Santee, type in Santee, do Control Find on your page. I'm in Chrome. I think it's Control Find in a lot of other browsers as well. But you can basically search. And so I just pulled up Santee to show somebody, that might be looking for Santee. This is how you get to it. You'd find Santee. Alternatively, if you wanted to look for a zip code, my office is located in Mission Valley, 92108. So you could type in 92108, and there it is. It shows the reference to the City of San Diego Incorporated. So these are the rules I would be following. So that's some of the functionality of it. So just so the users at home can see it.
And the link should work too. So if you go above the zip code, that should be a link right there. and that should take you to whatever ordinance exists at the time. So this is the official City of San Diego ordinance, and this one in particular does apply to both residential and commercial with the same requirements for both. But you can kind of see, if you have some free time and you want to read through, you can see why these are confusing, and you can see some of the changes that are in there. But this is the current document that City of San Diego is following at this time.
Looks like they had a time machine and they traveled back to 1920 to write this. Type it out. Yeah, yep. Looks really good. Very technologically advanced. Okay, cool. Well, that's it. I think that then we go into the unincorporated areas. And again, it sounds like they're just following the City of San Diego.
They are. Initially, unincorporated had given a longer amount of time to provide documentation and information. City of San Diego says you must notify before rent is due, and then within 7 days, provide documentation. The county had started with, I think, 30 days or maybe 15 days. And the latest was that they wanted to mirror the City of San Diego and lower that time frame. And so although as of Friday, there was not an official unincorporated ordinance, I did link to some of the unincorporated website and then the list and map of what's on there. And I plan to update it as soon as something is signed, but that's where we're at with the unincorporated areas.
Okay, cool. That's awesome. I gave the audience a little reprieve from having to look at me, my ugly mug, but here I am back again, unfortunately. Sorry about that, audience. The couple questions for you. Thank you for putting that together, by the way. That is excellent. A couple other questions for you. For the vast majority of tenants, you know, they're not in a position where they don't want to pay rents. They do want to pay their rent. But, you know, obviously what's gone on with COVID, they didn't really have a choice they didn't have a choice in this, even for people that lost their jobs, or for those that are self-employed and aren't having the income come in that they would normally have, which a lot of people are feeling those effects right now. What would you recommend for those people? What would you recommend they do?
It is imperative that both landlords and tenants communicate with one another. And the reason it's imperative to do so is because if there is no communication, there's technically no protection for either. And you're going to find that the longer this goes, the further and further behind tenants will become. And like you mentioned, it's not because they don't want to pay rent, it's because they can't. And so one thing that I've been suggesting to owners is to talk to their tenants, reach out, ask if there's a hardship, and then try to reach an agreement to either accept maybe 80, 70% of the rent and waive the other part, because the way the protections are right now is that rent is deferred. And if anybody has ever had to collect from tenants or businesses, that sort of thing, it's really difficult to catch up. And so the biggest thing right now is to communicate and understand that the charts that I've made are what the rules are now, but how they're applied is something that is a guess to us. And in my experience of 9 years of doing this, the courts will be looking to protect tenants. And so it's really important for both sides to get in communication. Likewise, tenants need to reach out to their landlords. And even if they can't provide full documentation, do the best you can. As you mentioned, if somebody's self-employed, it's quite a bit more of a challenge. I'm self-employed, and so my proof would be showing that the courts have closed, possibly showing, my QuickBooks screenshots, something like that. And that's going to have to do for now for my commercial landlord, because that's all I have. I don't have pay stubs, I don't have hours, and I don't qualify for unemployment, as far as I know. So
gotcha. Yeah,
work together and provide an open communication and as much information as you possibly can.
Okay, that sounds good. You were, when we were discussing this prior to coming on and starting the show, you were mentioning that the court system is going to be impacted by this. Can you explain what you meant?
Absolutely. As I mentioned before we started this, the moratorium hit and everything shut down. And so I stopped counting at 23 lockouts that I already had scheduled that will now have to be rescheduled and reinstated. I also mentioned that I have judgments sitting on a desk. And what that's saying on the judge's desk, what I'm saying by that is those are cases that are already adjudicated, already done, already decided, should have been ready to be locked out and done. So all of those are going to have to be reinstated and reprocessed. On top of that, before the court closed down, we filed 13 or 15 new lawsuits that had not come back. And so those will be processed. And then it's going to be all of the lawsuits that come at the end of this that are going to bottleneck. The County of San Diego has one courtroom that services all of San Diego, including Ramona, Chula Vista, everything, all the outskirts, Escondido. And so you're going to have a huge backlog once this gets going. And that's going to be in order for owners to be able to protect their property and get their property back, but also that's going to be a backlog for tenants to be able to assert their rights based on their compliance with the rent moratorium.
That makes sense why communication is key, because trying to avoid that, I think, is in everybody's favor at this point in time. And that brings us to another important point that I wanted to talk to you about. I've seen the unlawful detainer court. People were packed in there like sardines. And with what's going on with COVID and this pandemic and the social distancing, we're kind of in a new normal when it comes to business. And as attorneys and as business owners, I think everybody's coming to the realization that we're in a new time here now. What advice do you have for the audience? What have you been doing to work remotely? Can you explain a little bit to other attorneys what you've been doing?
Absolutely. I'm 100% working from home. That's been the case since March 17th. We have all of our documents cloud-based. Zoom is new to me, but I like it so far. So I think that'll be something that's definitely integrated into client communication. We have already, early on, we made a mandate that we would not be meeting clients in person. And so I think that's the one thing that they'll have to adjust to. But I think with the social distancing and people getting accustomed to it, I think it's going to remain that way. It'll be interesting, like you said, Department 60, which is where the unlawful detainers are heard, has always been, I would like it to looking somewhat like a Judge Judy or night court type situation that has a ton of people in there and it's just going to get worse. So it'll be interesting to see how that part of our job as an attorney changes, because there's going to have to be a way to keep people out of that space. And right now there's no way to do it. So we'll see. But the working from home has been fairly productive. Maybe that's just because there's less work to do. I'm not sure. But it's possible. And I think people are going to set up their homes to accommodate for it. I haven't heard my dogs barking yet, but that's something that'll certainly be a challenge. And being around the people that are in your home is also somewhat of a challenge, but definitely doable. It's been doable. Right now I have limited staff still working for me, and that's worked just because of the way our system is. Everything is drive-based, everything.
Sorry, do you think it'll stick? Do you think it's going to stick after everything's over? Do you think there's going to be some, working remotely is going to be a new thing for the office?
I think that some will stick. I think that it's going to depend upon the person, because as I mentioned to you before we started, I love working from home. I'm very effective at it. I'm very efficient at it. I think that others might find it a little bit more challenging. The refrigerator's right there, that sort of thing. So we'll see. I think that integrating back into an in-office situation may be a little bit slower, because it just may not be necessary at first. But I do think there's some value in having a person physically in an office. It's just how quickly we go back to that, and if we go back to the same extent that we were before the COVID-19.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That all makes sense. Well, I want to put up your information and also my information. So if anybody needs to get in touch with Rachael, this is the best way to get in touch with her. This is the contact information for her firm. My information is on there as well for the Law Eagles. So Rachael, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you if they need to?
As we're working remotely, the best way to get in touch with us would be through the email, rachel@sandiegoevictions.com or info@sandiegoevictions.com. We are responsive to phone calls, just not as quickly as email. And of course, the information you can access if you have general questions. Our website should be continuing to grow in its utility and in helping landlords and tenants, frankly, get information.
Gotcha. And if people, I mean, like you were saying earlier, people don't need to wait on this. People can start communicating now and start getting the information back and forth. I think it would be vital and essential that if a landlord's having a problem with a tenant, or a tenant doesn't understand what's going on, maybe having an attorney involved may be a good thing, just to give information and give it from a source that's, just something that's a little more, credentialed, I guess, something that when they see it, they're like, okay, now I got to take this seriously, rather than just something from my landlord. So landlords can still reach out to you during this time and work with you now. They don't have to wait until this thing's over, right?
That's correct. And we've already been working with tenants to come to agreements. I prepare what I've called lease addendums that actually set up a payment plan or a deferred rent, that sort of situation. And how effective it'll be, we'll see. But at least it puts landlord and tenant on the same page so that everybody knows that they want to work together. And hopefully that's a function of it. The other part of it is making sure that as the landlord or the tenant, you're not doing something wrong that you could later have real problems with. So yeah, absolutely. I know that my firm's open. I know that to a limited extent, there are other landlord tenant firms still operating somewhat. The only problem is the court's closed, so we can't file anything, but we can certainly help with agreements and at least trying to counsel clients on what we know at this point. Yeah.
That's great. Perfect. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for all the great information. It was great having you on the show today. Yeah, thank you again. And good luck with everything. I hope you're staying safe over there.
Thank you. You too. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rachel. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.